Welcome to the live show for sinners and sufferers, where we have conversations about exploring theology, engaging culture, watching movies, music, all that fun stuff, all for weary souls in need of grace.
Oh.
And before we get into rolling the intro, actually, you know what? Do we roll the intro now?
Yes.
Skip the intro?
Yes.
Let's roll the intro
Intro.
now. Intro. This is the intro. If you're listening to the audio, you're probably like, what is this? There's a cool video playing right now. Just more motivation to check us out on YouTube. And it's Kyle's birthday.
Yay. Oh, you got a sound. That's so nice. Thank you.
I got him cake. Hold on.
I'll hold it up. Apparently, this is supposed to burn green.
Yeah, it's supposed to burn the color of the
Oh, it
candle.
does.
Yeah, that's like kind of...
You can't really tell, but I can
That
tell.
does look
And that's
cool
what
in the
matters.
video.
It's like a blue flame at the bottom, and then it's green at the top. Is this toxic?
Probably.
That's what when we used to camp when I was younger, we would always make a fire at night, as you do when you are camping, and we had like a trailer at a campground where it was like a lot of permanent trailers, and so our neighbor there walked over one night, and he threw in some wires into the fire.
Oh, yeah.
And wires make the fire all different colors and stuff. So that's what this reminds me of. It's very fun for people in general. I was going to say children, but people in general. Not sure. I can't remember if it's actually safe to roast marshmallows in after. It would seem it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
However, it is very cool and it looks fun.
I mean, how safe are marshmallows really? What are they even made of?
That is also
Though apparently
fair.
they're not vegan. I know that much.
Oh.
Which is interesting because like it just doesn't feel like an animal product, I guess. But
Yay.
anyways,
I blew out
you
my
blew it
candle.
out good.
That's what I said.
Okay. I was distracted. Sorry. So Kyle, you're a whole year older.
Yes.
What wisdom have you gained? What have you learned in this year of maturing in Christ?
So much stuff. Oh, so much I can't even comprehend. I'll give you one mature thought I had today.
Okay.
So we went to McDonald's for my birthday
Classic.
because we had coupons.
Nice.
And they have a new thing called the McCrispy.
Mhm.
And I wanted to try it because the McChicken is like, in my opinion, a top tier sandwich at McDonald's.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. I'm
It
more of a
is.
junior chicken guy,
Well, junior chicken is
which doesn't exist
Probably
in the
the top
States,
tier.
apparently. If you go and try to order a junior chicken, they look at you like you're a foreigner, which you are. But
that's very unfortunate for our American friends. So I want to try it. So I was eating my McCrispy. It was very busy in this McDonald's for whatever reason, like incredibly busy. Busier than I've ever seen any McDonald's, actually, I think. And I was eating my McCrispy. Very good at it, by the way. 8.5 out of 10 is what I would
Nice.
rate it. And I had a thought. I was like, well, so there's 7 billion people in this world. We're at 7 billion now, aren't we?
sure.
Pretty close.
That sounds
at least.
correct.
How many chickens do you think are in the world? And I had this thought as I was turning 29.
Mm-hmm.
How many chickens are in the world to produce all this chicken for people? Because like McDonald's itself sells a lot of chicken every day.
Yeah.
And then I have like chicken at home, and then grocery stores have tons of chicken.
Yeah.
And like if you buy chicken breasts, like they're like 4 to 6 in a pack,
Mm-hmm.
and each chicken only has 2. 1, 2, probably. I don't know. 2. No, it is 2.
You're not good at chicken biology.
And then so I'm like, that is a lot of chickens.
Mhm.
So the wisdom I have in my old age now is I don't know, but I would really enjoy an answer.
To how many chickens there are
Yeah.
in the world for your birthday.
Yeah.
I will Google it.
I can't say that on a more serious note, I can't say that I can think of anything where I was like, wow, I've learned a lot this year. It's just another year for me. However, I can say in all sincerity, although I do sound very sarcastic right now, I think, in all sincerity, that God has provided for me throughout this year. I think there was a lot of changes in my life in this year, and I'm still here.
Well done.
So that's enough.
My birthday gift to you is the knowledge that there are approximately 33 billion chickens in the world right now.
That is way more than I would have said.
I remember seeing some like PETA, like how many chickens are murdered in the world every day for your delicious meals, and it was a lot less than 33 billion, but I think that was like some astounding number as well that give me some perspective.
Yeah, I've been to a chicken farm before. I also worked at a chicken production factory, I guess you could call it.
Meat packing plant?
I packed chicken and we made like chicken fingers and stuff. And I've been to a chicken farm before and we went into the barn when they're very, very little, like just born, and they're like simulating days for them so they grow up. It's really crazy, actually. There was a lot of chickens in that barn.
Yeah.
So
I've been on people's farms who had chickens. But yeah. Like both of the egg laying and the McCrispy producing kind.
Yeah. Very good cake. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Anyways, well, I'll get us started on our first topic today while you eat your cake.
That was our first topic, my birthday.
Your birthday, that's true. That is a very theologically significant topic. It's very crucial to our goals of engaging or exploring theology and engaging culture. But yeah, one thing I want to say is there's just a lot of new music coming out. I don't know if you like, I know we follow some of the same bands. So like King's K is supposedly putting out an album soon. It kind of keeps getting bumped back, which I'm hoping is because it's going to be incredible. And I think they said it's going to be 2. And I don't know if that means 2 at once or like...
Maybe. I think they're playing it at shows right now.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to play it for the fans first.
Which sucks as a Canadian because like it doesn't help us. We can't go to any of their shows. Another Christian band I listen to, Demon Hunter, has a new album coming out supposedly soon. Again, was just pushed back because vinyl production is taking longer than normal. So they didn't want to release any of it until all the vinyl was ready or something, which is silly.
For a very niche
for
audience.
Hipsters, yeah.
Especially for Demon Hunter.
Yeah. It's
interesting.
Like, who listens to metal on vinyl? But I mean, also I have vinyls and don't even have a record player right now. So earlier this year, Citizens put out an album, which is great. I don't know if you've been listening to it much, but I love it. I feel like they finally found like the perfect balance because they sort of were getting away from congregational music, and I got to the point where it was just like kind of odd, and it's like wasn't as relatable. And you couldn't really sing it in church. And then they did a congregational album because they're like, we really want to return to this. And then this most recent album came out. And I feel like it's the perfect balance of like, it's relatable and you could maybe sing it in church if your church is like young and like up to new things. But also like, it's not, typical Christian music. Like it is creative and they're making their own like way genre wise and stuff. It's a really great album. But... yeah, been thinking about that a lot recently, but it's also become really relevant because I mentioned all those artists I mentioned are Christian, and one secular artist, well known for being incredibly vulgar and offensive, the kind of artist that as soon as I say his name, all the Christian moms listening will go, oh. So, well, here, let me build up to this. Recently, DJ Khaled released a new album compiling songs around the theme of God did it, supposedly giving God credit for his success. If you don't know, what DJ Khaled does is he networks. He goes, hey, producer, hey, rapper, you guys should make a song together. And they go, okay. And then he goes, DJ Khaled at the beginning, and he puts on an album, and he makes billions of dollars.
Has he rapped? I've barely ever listened to him.
He doesn't do anything. There's a video that went kind of viral a little while ago of him having some extremely rare guitar. I think it was Gibson gave it to him, or someone gave him some extremely rare acoustic guitar, and he was just butchering it. Like, the dude has no idea how to play guitar, and everyone in this like internet guitar community was so upset. But yeah, what he does is he brings artists to get together and like basically networks them, and then he puts his name on it and makes billions of dollars. But yeah, so his most recent album called God Did It, supposedly about giving God credit for his success. Most of the songs on it are incredibly questionable. There's one from Jay-Z that is like literally blasphemy. Like, it's quite concerning. But one track on there is Dr. Dre's remix of, there's a lot of names here, Dr. Dre's remix of Kanye West's Use This Gospel, because Kanye is apparently a Christian now. And it features a new verse from, and here it goes, get ready to gasp, Christian moms, Eminem. Eminem has dropped a verse on this with lyrics such as, I put all my trust and faith in you, Father. So my Savior, I call on you to rescue me from these depths of despair. Every single day I thank God, for that's why I pay so much homage, praises to Jesus always. And he doesn't swear. At one point, he literally says effin', like that's the word he says is effin'.
Oh, did he?
Yeah,
I listened
really
to it on
funny.
the way over because you mentioned this.
And that's where a lot of people are like, well, it's nice that he has enough respect to not swear, because he has I think he has one song where he doesn't cuss, and that's
Most likely.
I can't even think of what it's called, but that one everyone knows, the one Eminem song everyone knows, and it's probably because it's the one where he doesn't swear, so everyone can listen to it in
I
their
can't
cars.
even think of it.
It's like, I can't think of it. Lose Yourself? No.
No, he
Lose
swears
Yourself
in
is
Lose
swearing.
Yourself.
Shoot, what's the other one? Lose Yourself, everyone knows. But anyways, he has one song where he doesn't swear, and it's like one of his like more ballady type. But anyways, this has been causing discussion where people were like, did Eminem get saved? Is he a Christian now? And then other people were going, well, he always has been, because on his first ever album, which was very different from when he became popular, he also had a verse, which I should have written out because I can't remember it, but he also talks about how like his faith in God is what keeps him from being depressed, and he talks about the grace of God, and it sounds like a Christian line. Whereas this verse especially, like the whole song is all just like Christian. Some of the lines, like there's one where he talks about having the Bible at his side like a rifle, and I'm like, man, that is so cringy. It's perfect Christian rap.
Yeah.
Like but yeah, so a lot of people were like, is he a Christian now? Like, everyone pray for him and we'll see, time will tell. And I think that's it, is like time will tell. Like, if this is a one-off, if his next song is about like beating women and doing drugs and violence and all that stuff again, then clearly this was just a one-off that he did for whatever reason, Christian clout apparently. But
Which wouldn't make sense. So people said this about Kanye when he made his first, like, quote unquote Christian album. I just don't like calling things like Christian albums. That's why I said the quotes. Not that whatever.
Yeah.
But like when Kanye was like, I'm gonna come out with like a Christian album, people were like, oh, he's just trying to do it to get in good with the Christians. And it was like, why would Kanye West need to get in good with the Christians? He's literally like the biggest rapper of our time, probably.
Yeah.
And then same with Eminem. Like what?
Well, and so
what
many
does he need to?
so many
Maybe 'cause
artists
I don't
who
know.
are Christians try so hard to not have that label.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we're not a Christian band, we're just Christians in a band. And it's because they just don't want to be like pigeonholed into only being on Christian radio stations and getting on Christian playlists and stuff like that,
Yeah.
which is understandable. Like, it's even, well, and so I'll say this. So the first question that we're going to discuss is, what makes music Christian? Is there such a thing as Christian music? And it's funny for me because so I was talking to a pastor recently, and he's like, oh, do you have any like video of you leading worship online where I could like hear you leading worship, which is a very like odd thing. Like, I'd never considered having to produce evidence of my being able to lead worship before. But I was like, well, I have like this other artist identity that I used to do music where it's kind of like R&B, like hip hop R&B music. I was like, so you can hear me singing there. And he's like, oh, no, that wouldn't be a great example. But I was like, it's funny though, because in those songs, they're not worship songs. They're not about God. Like, one of them's about just like millennial depression, basically. Another one's about how much I hate online dating, which is funny because it's like my most popular one. And I feel like the people that actually like it, if they knew it's just about how much I hate online dating, would be like, oh, well, that kind of ruins it.
Yeah.
But Yeah, it's like, so am I a Christian artist?
Yes.
I make lo-fi. There's no lyrics at all.
Yeah.
Like actually, I have like recently I've been doing really well. I have 2,700 monthly listeners just on Spotify. But like, should I be like, I'm a Christian lo-fi artist? Would I get Christian clout?
I mean, you might. Who knows? But yeah, it is funny because there. I remember bands like when I was growing up, like Switchfoot. I don't know if Switchfoot. Yeah, Switchfoot said something like, well, plumbers don't go around and saying we're Christian plumbers,
Some
and
of them do.
yeah, I guess some of them do. I have seen that actually. Now that you say that. But like he's like, we're just artists and we write about what's important to us, and I think that's a good way of putting it. But I would say that like there's a lot of artists now that are specifically like, I am a Christian artist, and they do basically what they call worship music, but like, what is worship music now? It's so there's like, it's like, is there Christian music? Isn't there? I would say you could typically say something's Christian music if it speaks about like the Christian faith and life.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any reason why you wouldn't. And I also don't think, I mean, there's a whole subgenre of Christian music now. Well, Christian worship now. And a lot of people are like proud to be like, yeah, I'm a Christian artist. I'm a Christian worship writer and things like that. So I guess you could say there is a thing such as Christian music. But if a band is just, 21 Pilots is another example where people are like, are they Christian or are they not? And they're very like, a lot of their lyrics are very kind of have almost like hidden meanings. And there is a lot of stuff, and I'm pretty sure the writers come out and said like he at least grew up Christian.
Okay.
And so he has that like background a little bit. But people are like, oh, is 21 Pilots Christian? Because some of their songs sound a lot like Christian. It's like it doesn't necessarily matter. He's writing about what's important to him.
Yeah.
And I think that's
and I
what
guess
it is at
that's
the end of the
what would be revealing, is if you're like, I'm writing about everything that's important to me, but you never like once mention God or your faith, then it's like maybe that's questionable. But then at the same time, like I said, I've never written a worship song. I find worship songs almost harder to write because there's so much of it. There's so much worship music.
Yeah.
That's like, other than like, unless it's for like myself or for my church, if I was thinking of releasing worship music, it's so hard to write anything that isn't cliche.
Yeah, it's true.
Because like everyone's just using lines from scripture. Well, for the most part, that's how you should be doing it, is using lines for scripture. So we've basically sung every like good worship line that we have from scripture at some point in history, in thousands of years of Christian history. And then you have people, when they try to make up things, you end up with like the whole reckless love fiasco, which we won't get into that. But
well, and Switchfoot's a great example, I think, actually, of like they have done very well as a band. They're not like a huge band or anything, but they've done very well, and they've been a band for a long time. And he has songs that are so clearly like he's talking about his faith and about God and everything. But then also he talks about like love for like his bandmates and friends and family. And he's just writing about like his experience in life. And he's openly said he's a Christian, but he's not like necessarily making like Christian music in that sense.
They're guys. So Switchfoot is one of my like all-time favorite bands. And I've seen them live a lot of times. Them and Reliant K I've seen live many times, and both of them I find, if you see them in different contexts, like you'll see them at Creation Fest or some Christian music festival or something, and their set list is a little different, and the things they say in between are a little different, a little more open. Like the last time I saw, I guess maybe second to last time I saw Reliant K was at a Christian festival, and they literally did a worship song. It was really cool to hear Reliant K doing a worship song. And then the last time I saw them was with Switchfoot, I think, at like Commodore Ballroom, something, Vancouver, some huge venue. Or no, it wasn't even. It was Queen Elizabeth, a huge venue, Vancouver. Clearly like not a Christian event. And that's where they're like love, hope, unity, and don't say the word Jesus type
Christian
thing.
themes, but not explicit. Yeah.
And some people would be like, oh, how dare you? But I think there's a difference too, whereas like if I'm a pastor on a stage and I'm saying love, hope, unity, and never saying the name of Jesus, that's really problematic. For a musician, like I think that's different.
Yeah.
I think that there isn't the same, like they're not preachers, they're musicians really. Well, and that's something even with like, well, with all of culture and in Christianity, we almost look too much to musicians, like as culture makers, and so many like entertainers. If you think of it, like entertainers used to be like the lowest class citizen. You were a fool or like a traveling minstrel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas now they're literally like lead culture.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the kind of, woke movement is because like celebrities are into it, and that's why it's taking off.
Yeah.
And then you had like Lauren Daigle was asked in some interview, they're like, what was it? It's like, well, as a Christian, aren't you against gay marriage? And she kind of gave a non-answer.
Yeah.
Like she sort of just talked around it, and people were really upset with her. Like Christians were like, how dare you? I was like, I don't know. Like, well, it's the same. Like if I was invited on Ellen DeGeneres or whatever, which I never would be because the only thing I do is be blatantly Christian. But if I was invited on Ellen DeGeneres and she's like, do you hate gays? Well, you're in an awkward situation now. And if you're not someone who's prepared to like nuance that discussion and stuff, like, what are you even going to say?
Yeah. Sure.
Like, you're going to say no. And then you're like, how do I be faithful to my religion? And like, I think we just expect too much of musicians in that regard.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of them, like Lauren Daigle, for example, probably doesn't even write most of her songs.
Yeah.
She may be a co-writer, maybe, but a lot of like the career path that she's had, it's like she's had a very good publicist, and then also like a lot of people behind producing her music.
Which,
so
as an aside, is so frustrating because writing music, like writing full songs for me is the hardest part. And like I find even by the fact that I have like one song that was like my mini one hit wonder type thing, is like people don't really care that much about your singing.
yeah.
If your song is good and you have like some decent production, people will enjoy it. So if you could take anyone, and if you have a good songwriter ghostwriting them songs, they could be famous. And it's just so frustrating.
They just choose a person now and
Yeah.
skyrocket them.
But yeah, so on this topic, is it okay for Christians to listen to secular music, to non-Christian music, if there is such a thing as Christian music? And if so, where do you draw the line?
Yes, it is. I listen to it regularly.
Yeah.
But like, it's kind of a funny question that we're even like, that's even a thought for us to bring up, because it's like, can you listen to music?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, of course you can. I guess the question is like, guys like Eminem, for example, who now has a Christian song apparently. He's known for like swearing a lot in his songs, and I mean being an amazing rapper as well. But but a lot of Christians for a long time were like, no, Eminem, we're not listening to that guy.
Yeah.
Because he swears a lot, and like I don't even know a lot of his songs, but like some of his content too is not very Christian. So I mean, there's a line that you do need to draw, I think, because like what you it's similar with movies and TV shows. What you allow to yourself to listen to and watch will affect you at the end of the day. That doesn't mean that like if you only listen to Christian music, you're going to be a way better Christian. It's just that like if you put junk in your brain, that it affects you over time. That's just with anything, any type of teaching or show or music or whatever. So I think there is a line. I think people need to figure that out for themselves, what their line is.
Yeah.
It goes back to the conscience discussion that we've had so many times. And I think it's the same thing where it's like, if you're with someone and they're not okay with listening to Eminem and you are, probably shouldn't blast Eminem in the car with them. So
when I have like multiple playlists on my phone for those reasons, I'm like, friend in car who I don't know where they stand on these things. There's like youth in the car and like, like different sort of demographic playlists. But yeah, I think I agree. It's considering the content, and even as someone who listens to a lot of metal, it's funny because a lot of metal is like talks about like death, and it talks about war and things that aren't inherently bad, aren't inherently good. This is kind of cool, gets you amped up. But then you also have like band names like Lamb of God, who I don't believe is in any way Christian. Living Sacrifice is Christian. Like, yeah, like, but this is very much like there's lots of God themes. But then you have bands that are like literally satanic. Then I'm like, well, I don't want to be listening to this, because even if they're making light of it and they don't take it seriously, I'm like, that's just not something that I need to be steeped in and listening to, and like in my mind, and not something I need to be giving more airtime to. Like, so even if it's not specifically, because there are bands too, like Demon Hunter is pretty, I mean, they mainly talk about like politics and stuff, but like they're clean, at least they're like pretty outspoken. Bands like Wolves at the Gate, they actually did a project a few years ago where they redid a bunch of songs from one of their albums as acoustic, and you could play them in church.
Oh,
Like,
okay. That's
it was so well. Like the lyrics were so solid and so worshipful. Whereas then the original, there's like scream, scream, scream. Then they have this acoustic album, and I'm like, I could totally play this in church, and no one would question it. But yeah, and then I think like being honest with ourselves. Like there are times where I've had a song saved on Spotify, and then I've removed it because I'm like, you know what, this is dumb. Like, I don't need to be listening to this content. I actually really don't like what they say. Because like I had a friend a while ago who was like, yeah, if I listen to a lot of like R&B and hip hop, and they talk a lot about sex, but always just in my mind I imagine that it's in the context of like a covenantal marriage. I was like, okay. I was like, I think that's just trying to justify listening to the music that you want to listen to. But
well, and music is it's a very supply and demand industry. So like if you're listening to it, and now it's like, how many listens on Spotify does it have? And or like with music videos is like, how many views does it have on YouTube? So if you're listening to it always and watching it, like that's giving incentive to the artist and the production company to do more of it. So I mean, that's always something to think about as well. Not that like you have to call for boycotts of every band, but it's just like, you know, whenever you listen to it, you're just adding to their incentive to do more because of supply and demand. So,
what do you listen to on the regular, Kyle?
I don't know. It's a funny question because I like music. I don't think there's many people who don't like music, but I like music, but I don't necessarily like follow a lot of music anymore. So like bands we've mentioned, like Switchfoot, I listen to fairly regularly, actually. 21 Pilots, stuff like that. I have very wide range of things that I listen to. I have a couple of playlists of just random different songs that I listen to. I find myself more in like kind of the rock genre than anything. Or like kind of alternative stuff as well. Alt rock, alternative. Sometimes like hardcore music. I don't know. I'm all over the place sometimes.
I have a theory because I feel the same. Like I really love music, and I actually listen to music a lot. But I don't follow music in the same way that I used to, especially when I was a teenager. I'd like learn all the band members' names. Like I could mention my favorite bands. I could say like, you know, Demon Hunter is one of my favorite bands, or like August Burns Red's really cool, like stuff like that. Whereas if I saw them out somewhere, I probably wouldn't recognize them because I'm not like looking up photos of them. I don't have posters on my wall, stuff like that. But I have this theory because I noticed like a lot of people just don't really care. Like listen to whatever's on the radio. And I think if you're in a position where you listen to music a lot, because friends of mine, so people who have like a desk job or they work in like a creative market where they can listen to music while they work, will be a lot more particular about the music that they listen to. Yeah. And I think it's because you're so steeped in it that you start to like build more preference and like get tired of certain things. Like I kind of just hate like most top 40 hits because I worked in a mall for so many years, and that's just
That's
all
all
I
you
heard.
heard, yeah.
And I was so
Yeah.
tired of hearing it. Whereas people who like, if like most of your life you're not listening to music, then like any music is kind of a treat. They're like, oh, this is nice music.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, and I think I listen to the radio every now and then, but a lot of times I'll just turn, like, my phone connects to my car
Yeah.
automatically, and then it's just whatever's on there. A lot of King's Kaleidoscope, actually, especially since they released like a live
Oh, that's
album of
so
like all
good.
their stuff, because
Yeah.
it's like 2 to 3 hours long. So I just like put that on. I'll also randomly put on like Hamilton
Yeah.
music, like the Broadway show, like stuff like that. I don't know. I was really into Switchfoot and Emery are probably the two bands I was into the most in high school. And like Switchfoot to the point where I was like always listening to their music, but also watching videos on YouTube of him when he does like after shows and stuff like
Yeah.
that, because he would do like kind of his songs that he's been working on in after shows. And I'd be like, oh, I love this song
Yeah.
that he hasn't released yet, but he did it at an after show
Yeah.
in Milwaukee or whatever. So I used to be really like into them for sure.
That's someone, if I saw John Foreman on the street or something, I'd recognize him for
Yeah.
sure. I feel like it's like the millennial Christian teen trifecta was like Amber Lynn, Switchfoot, and Reliant K.
Yeah.
It's like we all listened to them in some measure.
Yeah. Now it's all worship music people.
Yeah, it's funny how like, because there's this thing where I remember there's some interview with the guys from Jars of Clay, and they're saying they kind of died out because people were like, well, we don't want Christian music that's not specifically worship. So then they kind of lost their audience. And I almost feel like it's been like this ebb and flow with that, whereas like maybe Jars of Clay could make a comeback, because even a lot of the worship music that's trending, like worship artists, it's not especially congregational. Like
No,
a lot of the
it's
really
not.
cool stuff from like Maverick City or whoever's cool, like it'd be pretty tough to have a whole congregation sing that together. But
Yeah.
anyways, final question before we move on. If you were a wrestler, what song would be your entrance music?
I thought about this because you told me this was coming up. So currently right now, Separate Ways
Separate Ways?
by Journey.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But that possibly is because of it being in Stranger Things this past season. But it would also be a great song to walk into.
Yeah,
If I
mine
had
would
to
be
choose-
running up that hill
Yeah.
because
I'd be running on that. If I had to be Christian, though, I think a great one would be Battle Belongs by Phil Wickham.
nice.
Because it's, when I fight, I fight on my knees. The battle belongs to you.
That would be so funny to walk out to. I just imagine like some pyro goes off and you walk out.
When I fight. Yeah. And then everyone can have a worship time in the wrestling ring or arena or whatever.
Ever since watching the movie Boom Boom Pow, where he had to on the fly decide what his entrance music was going to be, and he chose that song, and that's the name of the movie. Actually, I think it's the name of the movie. That's what I've always called it. It's Kevin James becomes an MMA fighter to like get
Boom.
money for.
Here Comes the Boom or something.
Here comes the boom. Yeah, sorry, not Boom Boom Pow. Here comes the boom. That's right.
Yeah.
It was something boom. Yes, the POD song. Okay. Ever since watching that movie, I've been like, oh no, what if randomly I have to choose my entrance music? So I've had like a couple on standby. If like not Christian, if I was like at a random event, the song they might have, there's one called This Light I Hold by what is it, Memphis Mayfire, and it features Jacoby Shaddix, who is Papa Roach, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Pretty good. If I was allowed to do Christian music, Game On by Disciple is just such a like solid, and it hits right away. Because there's also, I really like Doomed by Righteous Vendetta, but it's like the longest intro ever.
Yeah.
Like, it'd be like the song's playing for 30 seconds. They're like, is he going to come out?
Another good one would be Let the Bodies Hit the Floor.
Yes.
Especially because it'd be like a great build up because it's the whisper.
There's a parody of that it's the rest of the band is like kind of like vulgar garbage, but they have a song called I Can Only Count to Four. That's like just let the bodies hit the floor, but it's like, I can only count to four.
That's funny.
It's quite good. Anyways, so for our theology topic are
I don't understand theology.
I didn't get to use that last week.
No, you didn't.
I need to edit that so it's quicker. We're talking about, we're continuing through the 1689. We're skipping a chapter. I'm sorry, 1689 purists.
For any of you who were watching.
Yeah, for anyone who's like, oh man, I really wanted them to talk about oaths and vows as an aspect of worship. I read it and I went, this is boring. And I don't know how I feel about it. Basically, it's to be cautious if you make oath and vows, like let your yes be yes, your no be no.
If there's very high demand, sure, we can do it.
Yeah, if you say I'm gonna fast, you get the point. So anyways, we're moving on to chapter 24, this is gonna be a fun one. It's on civil authorities, and I think we can do the whole chapter. So you've looked at the notes because I feel like the juiciest question is towards the end, and I don't want you asking it immediately before we build up to it.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I know.
We're at
Stay tuned, everyone.
1689, chapter 24. I'll just read the first paragraph. If you don't know what we're talking about, there's a link in the YouTube description, or you can go to, I think it's the 1689confession.com. If you just Google 1689 confession, it's the first result. You can read along with us. Chapter 24 says, God, the supreme Lord and King of all the world, has ordained civil magistrates to be under him over the people for his own glory and the public good, and to this end has armed them with the power of the sword for defense and encouragement of them that do good, and for the punishment of evil doers. So
I can't wait to step on some toes in this episode.
Oh yeah, this will get good, and we're building up to it. Don't worry, all of your controversial questions will be discussed. But so the main points of this is saying that God has ordained governing authorities, which is not to say that every individual authority is necessarily good and right, but more that like the system of government is a good thing, that he's ordained this idea, he's ordained leaders. When I think of King Saul, the first king, God anointed him, he chose him, he anointed him, he established his authority, but it was intentionally a bad choice because it was really the people's choice. Saul was the people's choice, and God was showing them how their choice of king was dumb. And because then the follow-up was David, who was like super...
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just thinking of this now too, but he also like keeps Saul in power after David is anointed as king, which is an interesting thing to... I don't know all the significance of that, but he sets Saul up under the people's wish and then anoints David later on to be the next king. But there's this whole thing of David not wanting to touch God's anointed, which he still sees Saul as, even though Saul's not obeying God fully. So it's like, it's a very interesting perspective to have with this.
Let's come back to that too, because that's a really good example of just like respecting the authorities God has established, but also like not.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically the theological point here is that God is the sovereign king, the King of Kings, has placed all leaders in their positions. No one's risen to authority like against his will. Doesn't mean he approves, but it does mean that he is aware and that they're in their position for some reason. We trust in his plan and his understanding that is beyond our understanding. And this paragraph speaks specifically of the power of sword, which is necessary for the defense and the punishment of evil, which is fun because, we'll get into a little bit more too, like this concept of like armed countries and war, and it almost like it's called the London Baptist Confession. It's not American. Americans didn't write this. It was Brits. But they stress the the importance that God has given the authority, the power of sword to these governing authorities.
I think that's one of the signs of a good government as well, is when they're actually using that power in a good and godly way. And I say that not saying like when we have a Christian prime minister or president and they're acting in a Christian way, like in the way in which like God has designed government to use the power of the sword for the punishment of evil, as it says. And so when, people who are doing evil are like put in jail, or like there is punishment to it, and punishment is brought, that is a good and godly thing. Yeah. Because it's enacting justice. So just because the prime minister is not a Christian doesn't mean that something, this could get me in trouble, I don't know, something that pleases God isn't happening, which is like if they're enacting justice.
Yeah. Well, and I think I'd have to look at the footnoted scriptures. I didn't save them for this paragraph, but I think what these pastors and scholars had in mind when they wrote this was thinking of just war, of the time that Israel waged war. And it was always either out of defense or specifically punishing evil. Because that's like a big, like in apologetics arguments and stuff and debates, you'll hear people be like, oh, what about when God condoned this like genocide? When God said, wipe out these people? And it's always people groups that when you look into them, they're like the most depraved people groups. It'd be like if, America crushed the Nazis and you're like, how could you say that America is good for killing the Nazis? That's an entire people group, but it's like you're missing the context of who those people were, and that this was a very just thing for them to have been conquered and destroyed in this way. I'm almost positive that's what they have in mind when they talk about the necessity of the power of sword, both for defense and for punishing evil. Yeah, is in war, and in, of course, just within like your own nation, like the ability to actually like discipline to hold authority. Yeah. But you want to read the next paragraph?
Sure. It is lawful for Christians to accept and execute the office of a magistrate when called thereunto, in the management whereof, as they ought, especially to maintain justice and peace, according to the wholesome laws of each kingdom and commonwealth. So for that end, they may lawfully now, under the New Testament, wage war upon just and necessary occasions. So one of the main things in that is that Christians are permitted to hold a government office. I don't know if there's many Christians who say we shouldn't.
So here's an interesting one for you, because we have our worldview based on being reformed and based on our eschatology, which I know we agree on. And we're considering this through that worldview, because I was just talking with a pastor yesterday who is premillennial, which we are not. And he said that Christians shouldn't be vying to make changes in government. And then that's not our concern. Our concern is to focus on the church and the preaching of the gospel. Whereas a post-millennial, which we also aren't, though I would like to be, if someone could convince me, they seem so optimistic. It would be nice. But if post-millennials are like, we need the whole government to be Christian. We need all the offices to be filled by Christians so that God's law becomes the law of our nation and every nation in the world. And that's like the post-millennial approach. Whereas us as amillennials,
I don't know. You're saying that I'm an amillennial. I don't even know.
You've called yourself amillennial. Well, I even say I'm like somewhere in between.
I think I'm like, I'm basically like, I feel like that's probably where I am, but I haven't looked into it enough.
Yeah. But honestly, it's like mostly the it'll work out perspective to take. Yeah. But
anyways.
We did a whole episode on this at LBC. You said you're amillennial.
Did I?
You have convinced me.
No.
But anyways, the amillennial view, like we take this stance, or the amillennial and undecideds, we take this view where it's like, yeah, Christians and government could do good. We don't have this defeatist view that the world is just constantly becoming progressively anti-Christian and there's no hope. But we also don't have this like conquest view that we need to like seize every office and establish God's kingdom. but we do land in this place where we think that it's fine and potentially good for a Christian to be in government, but not necessary.
Yeah. And I think, I don't think a premillennial would say a Christian shouldn't be in government office, but yeah. So the duty isn't necessarily to fight for those laws, seems in line with what I know as well. And I think that is an interesting perspective. And it's funny because I find myself in the middle of a lot of these, but I come to the question, and it's like, people are like, well, shouldn't we be fighting for good and godly and Christian laws and voting for Christian lawmakers and things like that? And it's like, yes, I don't know how a good godly law would be a bad thing, and to fight for that as well. I can't see that as a bad thing. If it's truly like a Christian view, it wouldn't be a bad thing for that to be the law of the land in my mind. But also, I think there is that part where it's like it's often comes off as like conquest, and like we need to take over every kind of level of government. And I think it's just like this could be a really long conversation, but I think it's like so much focused more on the political side than it is on like the Christian side. And I think I want to be fair as well. Like, not all post millennials are like, we just need to take over the government and that because we want to control the politics. But it often comes across like that. And so there's this balance of like, you could actually put a Christian into office if you voted him just because he's a Christian. You could put him in office. He could be a horrible politician, and just like not get anything done, not listen to not be a delegate for the people, like all this kind of stuff. He could be a horrible politician, where someone who maybe has views that align more with Christians, but is not a Christian himself, would actually be better in government. And I think that like kind of messes with people's heads, because they're like, how could a Christian be worse? But it's true. Like, I remember when we were looking for like contractors and things like that, like plumbers and all that kind of stuff. And my dad was like, it's funny because I've dealt with like, plumbers who I know are Christians, and like, I've gone to church with them before, and they tried to rip me off more than the guys who weren't Christians. And it's funny because we often just say like, well, if they're Christian, it must be better. Like we have a better chance with the Christian, but it's not always.
Well, I've had employers where like the Christian employer was so like strict and harsh and just like miserable, but then my like secular employer was very like kind and generous and empathetic of their employees. But I'll say too, because I know a lot, like a high percentage of our listeners are American. We are Canadian, if you haven't caught that. So because a lot of things like for Americans have this perspective that it's very clear cut for them, for a lot of them, where they're like, that's the Christian party and that's the non-Christian party. Whereas in Canada, like we don't have a two-party system, and like where the conservatives might generally hold more Christian values, there's no anti-abortion party. Like that's just not a thing in Canada. Yeah. There's no, like it's a lot different. They're all just a lot closer together. Yeah. Like basically all of our parties are center or left of center. We don't really have right-wing parties.
Well, and that's just the reality of Canada right now, is like there's like the abortion debate in the States, and the whole thing of like, we need to get this many justices in the Supreme Court so they can overturn Roe v. Wade, which they did. And now it's left to the states and all that kind of stuff. And that's it's not even like close to happening in Canada. Yeah. Like even the conservatives are just like, they don't even talk about it. And it's funny because like whenever Canadian elections happen, the Liberals and NDP, which is another Liberal party, if you don't know, they're like more left than the Liberals. They're like, you conservatives don't fight for the rights of women. And then the conservatives were like, yes, we do, blah, blah, blah. And like, it's almost like, but we're more left than you. And the NDP are like, yeah, we're more left than you. And it's just like, who can be more like...
I wonder, that might even be, again, just talking about like presuppositions and our worldview affecting us. Like that guy I talked to, the premillennial guy, is also Canadian. So like in Canada, being pro-life just means educating. It just means telling people and trying to convince people not to have abortions. It's not a political stance to be pro-life.
We literally at this point can't vote for that.
Yeah, it's a worldview. It's something you do through relationship and through like speaking to people, and that's more kind of the stance he was taking with basically most Christian policy, whereas all the post-millennials that I've learned from and heard from are all Americans, where there is this prospect that they might be able to establish like a Christian government, and they still consider themselves a Christian nation in a lot of ways. So that might be why they, whereas I just need to read more Puritans maybe, but that's where like a lot of where with eschatology stuff, I feel like Emil is very much just like no one's too upset with you when you say you're that camp. But when I think of this like idea, just looking at history is really, because I love church history. That's weirdly one of my strengths, considering how bad I am at memorizing like dates and numbers. But throughout church history, we see this ebb and flow. Like when people talk about like, oh, Christians, we're going to suffer. We don't know suffering. Christians have never suffered. It's like, yeah, Christians have. Not here. But like Nero was absolutely brutal to Christians. Like Christians were being like burnt alive to be used as lights for parties, and just brutal things that I probably shouldn't say on a YouTube video. Yeah. But like you see this ebb and flow, and then I remember reading a book, and maybe the guy was post-millennial, but this guy was almost mourning the collapse of like the like Roman Catholic Empire, basically, because he's like, oh man, Protestantism is called the Gravedigger hypothesis, how because of the Protestant movement, it caused this collapse of like the church's hold on government in the world, and he's like mourning this. And I was like, I actually don't see that as a bad thing. Like I don't think that's really the like prime objective of the church is we need to like have the empire in our pocket and be like the world government as the church. And that's where I like personally I felt like a lot of the one side is leading, whereas a lot of the other side is leading towards this like, let's just give up.
Yeah, and you can see even in this, like it's very nuanced, and I know there will be a lot of things that we haven't touched on or people will assume about what we believe about these things, but it's like to sum this part up, like I think we both would say that it would be a good thing for Christians to be in government and like go for it if you're a Christian, and be a good politician, like represent the people well, go for godly laws and everything like that.
This is gonna be a long episode.
Yeah,
we haven't even made it to that big question yet.
I need to keep going. So this actually leads into your next one before we get into your big one, which we can probably, it's pretty simple for this one, so we can kind of go quickly over it. But it talks about waging war upon just and necessary occasions. And so the question of should Christians be pacifists? I think the Brethren Church in Canada is pacifist, but Baptists typically have been what I think is called just war theory, where it's like if what this says, if it's wage war upon just and necessary occasions. So a great book that I never finished but have read a lot of it is the biography Bonhoeffer. Talks about his life, and he was involved in one of the plots to assassinate Hitler. And it does a really good job of talking about kind of his process and his upbringing and all that kind of stuff, but also like he was a Christian guy who was a pacifist, but then lived in Germany during the time of Hitler and decided that this is actually a time where it is good and just to try to do something about this. And that's something where I think we would both agree with the confession here, where there are times when it is just and even necessary to wage war, and to not be pacifists in that way.
I think I'd just say like not in the name of conquest, like again for defense and punishment, not for gain, or like anything Russia's been doing the last few years.
We want to take over the world. This is just because we're better.
But then, I don't know what's going on. Okay. Yeah, let's move on because we still got some stuff to cover here. Paragraph 3 says, civil magistrates being set up by God for the ends aforesaid, subjection in all lawful things commanded by them ought to be yielded by us in the Lord, not only for wrath, but for conscience sake. And we ought to make supplications and prayers for kings and all that are in authority, that under them we may live a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and holiness. That got really old Englishy and trippy.
It did, yeah.
But the big parts is it's saying we obey the law, like so much as it is, or where is it? Basically, yeah, so as much as it is in line with what God commands, we obey the law. And then we pray for our leaders. Yes, I think of like Romans 12:18 says, as much as possible, we are to be at peace with all men. And it says that at the end, live a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty, which I think is from a different Romans passage. Is that from, Romans 13, 1 to 2, let everyone person be subject, or is at the end of Romans 13? I don't have it in my notes, but he says, as much as possible, live a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty. That is the Christian goal. We are to be law-abiding citizens. We are to be at peace. We're not to be stirring up trouble and causing riots and making a scene. But I think in recent years it's really come up because it's always been kind of hypothetical. Yeah. It's like, what if the government tells you to do something against what God tells you? And it's always been very hypothetical. But in the last few years, it's been a lot more like real and just happening, where it's like, okay, what if the government did tell us you can't gather together, you can't speak to one another in psalms and spiritual songs, you can't have fellowship, you can't be the ecclesia, the assembly. And it's like, what is the Christian response to that?
Yeah, I think it became even more difficult when restrictions on a lot of other things were lifting, and then for the church it was like, you have a special rule for worship gatherings, you can only do this and this and this. And so it became even more of a question there. And lots of church, we're not looking back and saying these people did this right and these people did this right. But this whole idea of like live peaceful and quiet lives also doesn't mean lay down and just play dead. And you don't have to. And I think one of the things, there's a few ways that different churches dealt with the whole idea of like, the government said you can't gather together because of this virus. And so there was ways in which some Christians took live quiet and peaceful lives and like submit to the government. And it was like, we're just going to sit back and do nothing. Yeah. And we're just like not going to talk about it. And it's like, well, these are the guidelines. This is what we're going to do. And that's that. And then there was others who were like, no, this is against what God's command is for the church. Therefore, we're going to disobey the government and we're going to go ahead and do it anyways. Very polar opposite views. And they were both going to scripture for it. And I think one of the things that we see there is there was a little bit of it was dealing with the conscience. And for some believers, they interpreted scripture and passages like Romans 13 to mean whatever the government says, I'm doing.
I was mistaken. That live peaceably is from 1 Timothy.
Oh, okay, yeah. And so they take Romans 13 and 1 Timothy, and they say, well, we're just going to listen to what the government had to say here. Yeah. And it was a very difficult thing, but one thing I saw that I think is actually more important to bring up is we also have this command and theology of we need to pray for those who are in leadership. And what we saw is, Christian leaders or Christians, I would just say Christians in general, especially online, as it usually goes, being very outspoken, but also just like rude to politicians and speaking out against them and saying like really disrespectful things as well. And then being like, but we pray for our government.
Yeah.
And it was like this thing where it was like, I know I'm supposed to do this, so I'm going to say that I pray for them. And yeah, we did pray for them on Sunday, but it was like, it's almost like praying in this way in which it's like a false humility of like, yeah, we prayed for them, but also Justin Trudeau is an absolute idiot.
Yeah.
and so it's like, it's going both ways. And, you know, this may seem almost like a non-answer to a lot of people. And we're just like, I'm just running around it. But it's a situation that we have to deal with as Christians where there are some Christians who looked at this and said, the way I can honor God most in this, I think, is to live quiet and peaceable life and just follow what the government says.
Yeah.
And then there were others who were like, no, I really think gathering is a command that we need to do. And they went ahead and did it. And we allowed that to get in between us.
Yeah.
And it wasn't it wasn't a question anymore of like, are we following God in the best way that we can and in a way that we believe is coherent and right on with what Scripture says? It was like, well, this is what I think, and that guy's not doing it, so he's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely a time of weird polarization because, the passages we didn't read, the Acts 4:19, Peter and John say to, I believe it's like the Sanhedrin, they're being accused of something, and they say, whether it is right in the sight of God to listen to you rather than to God, you must judge. Later in 5:29, Peter again, Peter's my guy, Peter and the apostles answered, we must obey God rather than men. So we do have this president of we obey God rather than men, but we do it peacefully in a dignified way. And what I saw so much, because even like at the start of the pandemic, I was a discipleship pastor, so community groups are part of my role. But I also was an associate, so I didn't have a lot of authority to make decisions. And I found when they first were like, okay, you can only have groups of like 10, I think it was initially. I was like, sick, we can still do community groups. I was like, let's do community groups. We're still gathering together. We're still obeying, but we're also not disobeying the government technically. So like there's a compromise. And then even when it got down to 6, I'm like, honestly, just be quiet about it. Like just say, like if people show up at your house, be like, oops. But then people are either, and I felt so caught in the middle because I felt like half the people in leadership are going, no community groups. You do not encourage people to have community groups. We all just stay home and lock ourselves in our rooms and cry. And then the other side is like community groups. No, if it's not the entire church, if we don't make a stand and we have all 400 of us together and we don't send a letter to the local chief of police and invite him to one of our services and we don't whatever John MacArthur did, like it's just like super polarized where like we either don't try at all or we insist on like too much. And I just think like if this is our first taste as Americans of like real persecution, which even then is pretty soft, I think of like the church in China, and could you imagine if they did either? If they're like, well, it's illegal to be a Christian, so I guess I just won't be.
Yeah.
Or if they're like, you know what? No, we're going to meet in the town square and just get absolutely massacred. It just wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
And I think as North Americans, we've been spoiled in a way by having so much religious freedom that we don't know how to respond when anything comes against it. But I think, we need to ask ourselves, how can I be faithful to God, but also be peaceful and quiet and dignified? And then like your point, the way we treated each other, and even still, I see people go back and forth about like if you're vaccinated or not. Or like people are like, are you going to be okay with hanging around with you? Because some people in the church aren't vaccinated, and like they might not be okay with the fact that you are vaccinated, and so on and so forth. I'm like, bro, like the thing that unifies us, like Christ died tore down the passage I read last episode, tore down this barrier, this division of hostility between us.
Yeah.
And we're gonna let like a stupid vaccine that doesn't appear to be doing much of anything one way or the other like get between us. And like it's just ridiculous. Like it's undignified.
Yeah.
It's not living peacefully. It's not a quiet life. It's weird how we've become so hostile in this.
Well, and I think I think a good topic, because I don't want to go too much longer.
Yeah.
We need to kind of close this off, but a good topic is that topic of Christian persecution. What is it, and like how do we deal with it as well? Because that was the huge cry, was like, we're being persecuted, therefore we need to do something. And whether that was right or wrong, I think is for another episode, because we could go on forever with that.
Yeah.
And I just think that one of the things that coming out of a situation like that, where this was a huge topic, and the whole idea of civil disobedience was a constant topic the past few years. One of the things that we want to always be thinking about, and I was thinking about this at the very beginning, is like, okay, how are we going to respond to this as a church and Christians? And at the end of all this, whenever it finishes, because we had no clue how long at that point, whenever it finishes, are we going to look back on it and be like, we represented Christ well in what we did?
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of it, from my perspective, and this is just my perspective, is a lot of it is like, if the world is looking at the Christians at all during that time, a lot of them would probably be like, they're acting just the same as us. Like, they're just as divided as us. And I think that's a huge mark on us as Christians as well, is just to say, like, you know, and this isn't true for all churches, but to look at it and be like, we're more divided than we've ever been, actually. And we're very divided after these past 2 years. And to look back on it. And I also think it's very important for us as well, as, you know, going to church on Sunday and that going to a service and everything, is, are we doing just the exact same thing we were doing before? Or did we learn anything in the past 2 years about the importance of needing one another, and the importance of, like, what does it mean to actually gather? What does it mean to be a church in general? Is it limited to just having to gather on Sunday, or is there more to it?
There's more to it. There's definitely more to it. If you're not having fellowship with Christians outside of Sunday, I'd challenge you to remedy that. Well, actually, we didn't go too much over. It's been an episode. Yes. I guarantee that if you're listening to this, you disagree with us on something.
At some point.
We said enough in there that you disagree with us. So we'd love to hear from you, speaking peacefully and with dignity. What are your thoughts? If you have any comments, questions, or snide remarks, leave a YouTube comment, or you can message us on Instagram. Or if you want to have more of a conversation and open it up to the rest of the community, you can join the Discord. There's a link in the YouTube description on our website, or the link in bio on Instagram. We'd love to hear from you and to have some back and forth. Most of the comments we get are from unbelievers that are angry with me. So it'd be really nice to hear from
because your response video to an atheist is, like, for some reason getting a lot of views.
Man. But it'd be really nice to hear from some Christians that disagree with me and are angry with me. That'd be a nice change. If you want to support us, the best thing you can do is just share this, or give a like, or honestly commenting on YouTube goes a long way. Leaving actual written reviews on Apple Podcasts, or leaving even a star rating on Spotify, sending people links, really goes a long way to help us just grow and reach more people and have more conversations. You also can support us. We do have a Patreon if you want to give monthly. The lowest option's like $2.50 a month or something like that, which is like less than an espresso. Or you can, speaking of espresso, if you buy beans from vinecoffeeco.com and use the code, I believe it still works, Sinners Drink Coffee, you get 15% off. That is Kyle's business, so it is very directly supporting us. Anyways, thanks for listening.